like a teaspoon like this as opposed to like an actual.
Hello Facebook, thank you for joining us. We're coming at you live from the Thai Meat Food Studios here in Birmingham, Alabama. My name is Sydney. I'm with Cooking Light Magazine, and today we are demoing pickled fried green tomatoes with buttermilk dipping sauce. I say fried because we're not going to deep fry them. We're going to lighten them up a little bit with a pan-searing oil and a few other tricks along the way that I'm going to show you. Green tomatoes, for those of you who aren't familiar, are basically unripe tomatoes. Ripe tomatoes, which are red and juicy and wonderful this time of year, are not good for frying because they're too juicy and too soft. So when you use a green tomato, it's a lot more firm and better for this sort of thing. It's also a lot more tart. As a tomato is a fruit, and as a fruit ripens, it gets sweeter. The starches turn to sugar and it gets much sweeter. So these aren't nearly as sweet as your red tomatoes. So we're going to start by pickling. I love fried pickles. I don't know if anyone's ever had fried pickles. They're delicious. We love fried green tomatoes. However, to make them tasty, you usually need to use a lot of salt and then the oil to deep fry. So we kind of combined the two together and decided, what if we pickled the green tomato and then pan-sear it to make it crunchy, to add all the flavor that you want without necessarily as much salt, and you don't have to use all the oil to add the flavor as well. So we are going to start by slicing a few of these green tomatoes. Now see the inside, it's much more firm than a red tomato.
Can you touch it like?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard.
Have you ever tried frying a red tomato?
I have not.
That's like an experiment.
I would honestly think, because there's so much water content, you would have spattering and spitting everywhere. I wouldn't recommend it. You can try it at home. I will not. But these green tomatoes, which you can pretty much find green tomatoes. We found these at Publix, which is a local, semi-local, pretty large supermarket. They're at the farmers markets now. They're fairly easy to find, but they're great. They hold up their texture, and we're going to pickle them. It's going to be a quick pickle because we don't want them to get too soft. And if you pickle something for too long, it will get soft. So what we're going to do, we've got a pan over here that we're basically going to mix equal parts of vinegar and water. And get this going. And you want it to boil for a couple of minutes, and then you're going to let the tomatoes sit and soak up all that flavor. So that's vinegar. Pickling is basically a mixture of vinegar, water, salt, and sugar. So we're going to mix that together. And we're going to throw these tomatoes in there and let them start doing their thing. All right, yeah, see these guys, it's almost like an apple, I would compare it to. It's
they're
crisp,
so tart.
It's tart, it's tangy, so we'll set those guys down in there. And I've actually pre-pickled some of these so that we could keep this ball rolling. And you can kind of see everything in a much shorter amount of time. But we'll leave those on. Once they come to a boil, let them boil for 1 or 2 minutes, and then you can turn it off and just let them sit.
So I noticed here that your pan is it's okay to be a little more crowded when you're pickling.
It's okay. You do want everything pretty much covered. Once it boils, and these guys will settle down a little bit, but that's all,
Yeah.
Fine for pickling. Okay, so we've actually got some pre-pickled tomatoes here that we will work with. But next we're going to put together our buttermilk dipping sauce. As with most things breaded and fried, it's always nice to have something to dip it with. Another reason we wanted to lighten this recipe, because between the tomatoes themselves and the dipping sauce, we're close to about 600 calories once they're deep fried.
Oh my, for how many?
That's for probably 4 or 5.
Are you serious?
With the dipping sauce.
And
Maybe
so
not
many
even
people
that
have these as appetizers.
Yeah. Appetizers, side dishes. That's basically 600 calories is a meal. So we're going to show you how to make it closer to, I think ours are 150 calories.
Diana wants to know if you can bake these.
Yes, I think you can oven bake them. They probably won't be as crispy because we're going to pan-sear them in a little bit of oil that gives our breading that crunch you want. But if you do want to bake them, I would spritz them with a misto or olive oil spray and put them on a baking rack. Anytime you oven bake something, you don't want it the biggest mistake people make is they get a baking sheet and they put the breaded food directly on the baking sheet so the bottom stays gummy and mushy. Put it on a baking sheet or on a rack on a baking sheet, and it keeps that air circulation, the heat circulation going, so everything gets crispy. So our buttermilk dipping sauce is a little bit of low-fat buttermilk. I think this is about a 1/3 cup. Canola or olive oil based mayonnaise. Both of them are really good. There's not much, just enough to thicken it up. A couple tablespoons. Fresh garlic that we've chopped. Fresh basil, which is wonderful this time of year. And the more herbs, the better. Really, whatever you have on hand. Tarragon works well in here. A little bit of vinegar. And then some thyme, which I left it on the thing, on the stem to show you the best way to, it can be a pain to chop up thyme because you don't really want the stem. So just take it and pull from the other direction and the leaves come right off.
I think it's so fun to do that. It's like
I do too.
Satisfying.
So easy. And you don't have to sit there and pick all the leaves off. And it just comes right off. And add as many or as few herbs as you want. I love lots of herbs, especially this time of year, but we'll just mix that up. Mayo makes it a little bit thicker.
Can you use Greek yogurt instead of mayonnaise?
Absolutely. I love some Greek yogurt, and that would work just as well too. There we go. We've got our dipping sauce.
You say a little mayo is A-okay.
I think a little mayo is A-okay. I love the olive oil based mayo. It has a lot less. It has a lot fewer calories actually for whatever reason. But you can use canola, you can use regular, you can use homemade, and you can use Greek yogurt. You don't have to use mayo at all. Sour cream. Anything creamy and thick that would help thicken the dressing is really what you want to go for. Okay, so we are going to start breading and frying our tomatoes. I'm going to move this. And you'll kind of want to set up a station here because you're basically, you want some flour to stick to the, so that everything sticks on it. You've got flour, and then you've got your egg wash, and then you've got your panko, because if you put the egg wash directly on the tomato, it's going to slide right off. So it needs a little bit of flour so it sticks. So we start with that, and we have our pre-pickled tomatoes, and add a little bit of flour to our, and really you just need enough to coat lightly both sides of the tomato. Next we're going to set up our buttermilk, which we've got an egg and an egg white that I'm just zipping up here. Let me see what else goes this one. Buttermilk, egg, and egg white. That's it. So you use buttermilk in your sauce, but you're also going to use it in your egg wash. So we've got our egg, and then a little more buttermilk.
And you, I know, Sydney, you love buttermilk. What is it that you particularly love about buttermilk that adds to dishes like this?
I love how creamy and tangy it is, and it's thick. So you kind of want something thicker in an egg wash because it's going to kind of bind with the egg and stick to whatever it is you're breading a little bit better. So there's our egg wash, and then we're going to have a mixture of panko. You can use whole grain, masa harina, which is cornmeal basically, but for those of you who've eaten some fried things, a lot of times there's a cornmeal batter with fried foods that adds a really good crunch. So we are mixing the panko with the masa harina or cornmeal. And we're gonna have some black pepper. And just toss this together. All right, so we've got our three things. We've got our flour ready, our buttermilk, and our panko mixture. And I'm gonna go ahead and heat up the pan so that it can be getting hot over medium heat. And you'll want a non-stick skillet because we're not deep frying and because we're pan-searing. You really, really want to use a non-stick skillet for this because that breading will stick to it if you don't. So we're going to start just drying off our pickled tomatoes, and then you'll literally just do a light coating here, and then you'll dredge it in the egg mixture, and then your panko coating.
Erin wants to know if there's a non-dairy sub for buttermilk.
That is a good question. I think you could use almond milk. It's actually, almond milk's fairly thick. Any of the nut milks should work. It might have impart a little bit of the flavor on there, but that's fine too. I think a nutty milk would work well on that. And you really could leave the milk out entirely. It just dilutes the egg a little bit. You know how eggs sometimes they're thick. And you just want it to thin it out just a little bit. All right, you just coat this guy and then you go into your panko. You can just top it on there, press it, whatever it takes to get it to stick. This is a messy process, but a kitchen is a messy place, so that is okay. You literally just need a dusting of the flour. It just needs something to cling onto with the egg.
Now, how many different versions did you test of this before kind of figuring out this is the best method?
A lot.
I was wondering,
and I even tried them, and y'all asked about the oven. This got it crispier. That's not always the case. Sometimes oven frying actually does work really well. But with these, there was something about having that little bit of oil, hot oil in the pan that got the coating super crunchy and crispy, which when you're not frying something and you don't have that hot oil submersion, it's hard to mimic that with a lighter. And this was just a great way to do it. I'm gonna do a couple more of these guys and then we'll get these bad boys in the skillet. All right. Turn these pickling, let them just sit. All right. Put one more in there. You want a good coating on there. And it's a great combination with the cornmeal and the panko. And again, if you're just now joining us, we are doing some fried green tomatoes, but we've lightened them up a little bit. We are pan-searing them, not deep frying. And we've pickled the green tomatoes, which are already tart and tangy to begin with, but they're a bit firm. So the pickling not only softens them up, but it adds a bunch of seasoning without having to add a really heavy hand in the salt. Because most of these guys get heavily salted and then dunked in the deep fryer, so the oil soaks into every bit of this, which is another reason harder green tomatoes are deep fried. The oil softens it up. So we're gonna get these guys going. Okay, we've got our pan on medium and my tablespoons over here. We're gonna put a tablespoon of olive oil. You can use canola. In the South, people like to fry their things in bacon grease. Another way we're lightening this up. So you really want to get the pan coated. And turn it up. And then we'll just get these guys in.
Caitlin wants to know if you can fry these in coconut oil instead of vegetable oil.
I have never done that, but I don't see why it wouldn't work.
It would probably, unless it was tasteless coconut oil, take on the flavor a little bit more, wouldn't it?
Yes,
coconut oil.
I think so. I think if I were going to do this in coconut oil, I would use a refined version. All right, our pan's starting to get hot.
It is really amazing that you were able to figure out a frying method with such little oil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And actually what we're going to do before we flip them, I've got some cooking spray we're going to coat the tops with just to give it that extra layer before you flip. And then we'll add a little bit more oil. But as they kind of get going, they'll start getting crunchy. And they don't take very long, just a couple minutes on each side. And the panko's already crunchy. That's the beauty of using the panko in this recipe too. And they're just searing. You want to sear them till they get nice and brown. And if you have a bigger pan, you can do a bigger batch. But you can see our other tomatoes that we just pickled over here. They're just sitting, hanging out, letting them soak up that flavor.
What do you typically make these for? Parties or like dinners or dinner?
I think a
parties?
dinner would be great.
Yeah.
Parties, they don't sit very well.
Right.
As with most fried things, you don't want it sitting out for 15, 20 minutes. Actually, that would probably be fine for 15, 20 minutes, but you don't want to sit it out for an hour or two.
Yeah.
But it's just a fun, good, especially if you're just having a couple people over.
Can you go over again what the coating is and all the ingredients in this?
Yes, so what we did is we started with our pickled green tomatoes, and then we did a light dusting of flour, and then we dredged it in a little bit of buttermilk and egg wash. We did the flour so that the egg wash would stick. And then the final coating is a little bit of whole wheat panko and masa harina, which is a cornmeal, and adds a really good, deeper flavor, kind of almost a more authentic flavor and a good crunch to the outside. And salt, a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper. It doesn't need much salt because that pickling adds so much flavor to the tomatoes. These are about ready to turn. And we went ahead and made our buttermilk sauce. It's got lots of fresh herbs in it. And it's a good drizzling sauce. That's another way to add on the calories is when you dunk.
Yeah, what are some of our things here in
When
the
you
salad?
dunk your food in and you almost use the fried food as a dipper. So a drizzle kind of makes it easier to eat less of that. You can always drizzle a little bit more. These are perfect. Here we go. All right, this is actually a fish spatula I'm using. See how nice and brown? Oh, I forgot to coat. So you can coat them in just a little bit of cooking spray to help get them nice and brown. And we'll add a little bit more oil to the pan. So I mean, we literally just used a tablespoon of oil, and we'll use another teaspoon or two to help get we've got this nice little, just drizzle a little bit in the pan and kind of swirl it around. You can hear it with that sizzle. It's just making that coating good and crispy.
Can you talk again about what's in the pickling mixture over here?
Pickling mixture, all we did was equal parts vinegar and water. I think I did a cup of each in this particular mixture. And about 2 tablespoons of sugar and a half a teaspoon of salt. And it's not going to absorb all of that salt. So if you're watching your sodium in particular, this is a much lower sodium way to add a bunch of flavor to fruits and vegetables, is by pickling. And then we just figured, why not carry that over into the frying? And most things you pickle get really, really soft over time. So we keep this at a quick pickle. And then bread it and stick it in the pan to get nice and crunchy. And this is a great time of year to get those green tomatoes because everybody's growing tomatoes, so they also have green tomatoes, because all a green tomato is an unripe red tomato. It's much more firm, it's much tangier and tartar. It hasn't had time to sweeten with time as much. Tomatoes are a fruit. A lot of people still don't realize it's a fruit and not a vegetable. And fruits get sweeter. As you know, like bananas get really, really sweet when they get more ripe and more brown. Let's see, I think these guys are about done. Take them off. And you could, as far as making a head, we were talking about earlier, put them in an oven if you wanted to make some ahead and you know you had some guests coming over later. You could put them in the oven and let's see, that one needs a little bit longer, but we'll go ahead and stack it. So once they're brown on both sides, that one, you can do your stacks. And another reason I love green tomatoes is you don't have to eat them just plain. You could actually, here's where you want to take a red tomato, if I had one I'd show you, and you can stack them. You can alternate and stack, and that'd be really fun, especially if you're having people over. You could even take a thin slice of fresh mozzarella and put it on top too. I'm gonna grab a spoon, and then we'll just drizzle a little bit of this sauce over each one. And you could actually make this a little bit thicker with a little bit more mayo or Greek yogurt. But for now, this works just fine. And if you have extra basil, you can garnish with it, but that's pretty much it. Do we need to taste? Does anybody want to taste? Do we have any volunteers to taste our fried green tomatoes?
Yeah.
But that's it, pretty much. Pickled fried green tomatoes. They're really pan-seared, not deep fried. 150 calories a serving, which is 450 calories less than the original, which can have as much as 600 calories once you get all that dipping sauce in there. We don't have a fork and a knife. Otherwise we would taste, but I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for joining us. And again, you can find the recipe online. Have a good day.